Hi, Lyssa deHart here, and glad to be with you today. I wanted to talk about something that I think is important, which is when our clients get stuck and seem to be going in circles, what are these often hidden themes that underlie a lot of that sort of behavior? So let's get into it. I think as coaches, one of the things that we want to be listening for is not for the topic itself, but what is the theme that might be underlying the topic? And then, if we have a hypothesis of what that might be, we can ask our client, hey, this is showing up, and I'm curious as I say that, what's showing up for you? So let's begin with the beginning, which is for most places where people are unhappy or feeling really challenged, it's typically something that has to do with control or no control. So this again comes out of relationship work, but honestly, if you're a human being and you're upset about something, you're probably a human being in a relationship of some sort. Very few of us have the luxury of living completely alone on a deserted island with all of our needs met, and not just, eating coconuts, but I digress. Control is a real factor. And so when you start noticing that people are feeling helpless or overwhelmed about things, it often has to do with feeling out of control. And so this becomes an underlying theme. And so when somebody is telling you, I really don't like the way that somebody is, challenging every single thing that I bring forward, or something to that effect. It's a place where you as a coach might intuit that this is maybe a control issue. People who are talking about perfection a lot and that they can't finish something until it's perfect. This is a control issue, or not feeling like they have the capacity to be out of control where things are maybe not perfect. And I remember Liz Gilbert in one of her books, Big Magic, you know, done is sometimes better than perfect, since you sometimes just need to be finished. But control often is an underlying issue. The next one that I really pay attention to also when I see it show up in conversations is one of respect. Whether we feel like we're getting enough respect or we're being accused of not giving enough respect. Respect often is a hot button point for people. And so when people come into coaching or into therapy and they are upset, where they're feeling disrespected often, then that is the theme that we maybe want to explore with the client. Again, it's a hypothesis. We don't know for sure if that's true. But when I hear somebody talking about how they don't appreciate how their boss is treating them, and they don't appreciate how they've been spoken to, or somebody spoke to them unfairly in a meeting, or they don't like the tone of voice their children use with them, it's typically a respect issue. And so, like, we can't make the kids or the boss or the coworkers be different, but what we can do is explore the relationship to this idea of respect. And then where does the client have power in order to influence maybe having more respect? That could be boundaries, that could be any number of things. But again, it's a hypothesis. And so as I'm listening to somebody talk, I may ask, the word that's sort of bubbling to the surface for me as you're talking is this idea of respect. And I'm curious as I say that if anything in that shows up for you and would be important for us to explore. Integrity. Integrity is such a funny word, because I think, like many of these words, they mean different things to different people. But integrity is often this idea of somebody says they will do something and they follow through on it. And so there's integrity, that there is an agreement and then a follow through. And so you find people really struggling around issues of integrity. One, when they feel like they're not, that the person that they're dealing with doesn't have integrity, and they don't feel like their words and actions are in alignment. And so you may see that that's the underlying issue there. The other way that integrity shows up is when people don't feel like they're doing a good enough job themselves. And I don't mean like they're trying to have it be perfect, but maybe they're incredibly overwhelmed. And so in one of my coaching demonstrations here on YouTube, the word integrity came up in correlation to the client talking about how, if I can't do anything, well, I'll just do nothing. And the thought that came to mind for me was the word integrity, and that really struck a chord with the client. So it's just, again, a testing of a hypothesis, but this is often an underlying theme. If we're now talking about like what allows for integrity or how do you align with your integrity, that's a very different conversation than somebody, helping somebody figure out their calendar, which is not like the most useful kind of coaching. Not that there's anything wrong with trying to figure out a calendar, but we want to get to these underlying themes. Integrity is very co-aligned with trust because, again, it's actions and words that are in or out of alignment. But trust is often something that can be I don't trust you because you don't have integrity. That might be the issue. Or I don't trust my boss, or I don't trust my spouse, or I don't trust whoever. And so it's an external trust. And then even more important are, how do we learn to trust ourselves? And so when you find people who are really struggling with making a decision, it's not necessarily an integrity issue, it's a self-trust issue. It is, how do I trust myself to discern correctly what's going to be the best decision for me? And if there's any big thing involved in it, whether they need to spend a lot of money or it's going to take a lot of time, or there's some sort of large energetic investment that needs to be made around the decision, people's self-trust really gets shaky at times. On the other hand, I think it can also show up where the person, without very much information at all, no data points whatsoever, is leaping into making decisions about something. And again, this is sort of an avoidance of self-trust because maybe their internal narrative is saying, whoa, slow down. You need to get more information before you make this decision. So I see trust showing up a lot around the inability to make either a healthy decision or any decision whatsoever. So really noticing trust, because that's the place to talk. I mean, I can talk about the decision-making process, like how do you discern what you'll choose, how you choose to be at a yes or a no on something. But I think an even deeper, maybe more important conversation might be, how do you determine when you trust yourself enough to make a decision? That's testing of a hypothesis that trust might be below the surface. The client can always correct you if you've touched on it and it doesn't land for them. And they're like, no, I totally trust myself. Okay, cool. Then how do you determine decision making is just fine, right? But trust tends to be one of these things below the surface. Oftentimes, this sense of appreciation is very much co-connected to the next one also, but we really don't like it when people don't appreciate the contribution that we've made, and there's a sense of not being good enough that comes out of that. And so this sense of not feeling appreciation, not feeling like people care that we have done what we've done, if we've contributed in the way that we've contributed. We may not be looking for a big, like, you're so awesome. On the other hand, there are a myriad of ways that we are shown appreciation. And when that isn't happening, people feel a lack of that appreciation intensely. And often they start to kind of give up on whatever it is that they're doing. So you may notice this in coaching where you have a client who's just like, I'm just really not sure what the point of all of that is. And it may be, not absolutely, but might be an appreciation issue where they don't feel like they've been appreciated enough. Or this next one, acknowledgement. There's a really interesting correlation around the around this issue of not just appreciation, but acknowledgement. Now, I don't mean that we need the rah rah, you're so great, but I know for myself, I remember being in a meeting, a business meeting, staff meeting, and something that I had said, something that was sort of something I was working on in my own experience, and I was thinking about, got taken and presented as somebody else's thought process, even though it had really come out of me. And so there was this sense of several of these underlying issues getting, you know, tapped on. One being integrity and trust, like, hey, we had this conversation and I talked about this way that I was thinking, and now you're sharing that information in a way that makes it sound like it was your information, and in fact I wasn't mentioned at all in the outlaying of this idea that was being presented. And so there was a real lack of acknowledgement, a lack of integrity that was being a theme that was being triggered for me, and also appreciation and trust and respect. I mean, like, they all were getting impacted in that particular situation. So again, as a coach, we're not going to know specifically which one is being impacted for our client, but if we're listening for these themes, then we can at least be curious and invite the client to explore what's showing up there. And commitment. I mean, for many, many people, um, there's a sense of, are you committed? And we can get really frustrated with our, direct reports, our employees, when we don't feel they're as committed to something as we are. And on the other hand, we can feel very hurt by the fact that people are not committed to us. And so, again, in coaching, we're not coaching all of those people out there. We're coaching the person in front of us, and this idea of people's commitment. And I think also there's this place in which sometimes we have such a strong value around integrity and commitment to our word is our bond forever, that it is a place where we also need to explore, maybe there's room for negotiating our agreements with whatever the work is that we're doing. So commitment can show up in several different ways also. And this is just really, I mean, as we're thinking about these themes that show up in coaching, I think the thing that is really sort of important to pay attention to is that rarely, when somebody brings a topic forward, is the topic the true important issue. So there's these underlying themes to be kind of paying attention to and listening for, so that you can then test your hypotheses with the client as to whether or not this is true or not. And here's the deal also, you don't have to be a perfect coach, right? It doesn't have to be this sense of like, I must control this and make sure I do it right. It can be much more like, if I'm listening to a client, I'm hearing an underlying theme, I don't know what it is, and I say to the client, as you're talking, I'm wondering, this idea around, your word is your bond, or your commitment and integrity being interconnected here, is showing up for me as I'm listening to you, and I don't know that that's true or not. So as you hear me saying that, what shows up for you means that the client can now say something to the effect of, yes, absolutely, that's the bottom of all of this, is this integrity issue, or no, 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 it's not that at all. It's this other thing that I am really wrestling with. And so I think it's super important, as we're working with people, that we're aware of these often common underlying themes. I know, again, with the work of Howard Markman and the Prevention and Relationship Enhancement Program, they talk about these underlying themes. I think I've shared more than they share, but that's where I learned about it first. If you're doing couples and relationship coaching or therapy, I'd highly recommend taking a look at the work that they've done, because I think it can be really useful in helping to explore these underlying themes. But if you're a coach who's just working, that's terrible. Nobody's just working, but if you're working in organizations, relationship stuff shows up there too. It just doesn't often have like the do you love me and do you want to be here kind of element to it that a marriage or intimate relationship has. So, anyway, I hope this was useful for you today. You know, there is probably in one of these corners going to be some video for you to follow that might be useful, and hope you enjoy watching. Please connect with me on LinkedIn, especially I'm on LinkedIn, but on social media in general. Like, share, comment, and also in the description below, I will definitely have a link to the prep program information so that you can check out Howard Markman and his work. So cheers. I hope this was useful. Have a great day.